Let me ask you something. Do you remember the first episode of The Witcher Season 2? Do you remember the big bear man and his vampire GF? What was that about? Could you even tell that this was supposed to be a cynical take on the tale of Beauty and the Beast? The short story adapted in this episode is called A Grain of Truth. It's probably my favorite tale in all of The Witcher. And honestly, the episode wasn't that bad. This was one of the better episodes in the whole of The Witcher show. But I cannot deny that it misses the original tragic feel of the story. The original tale was a Geralt solo story. Ciri wasn't there. She probably wasn't even born at this point in time. And honestly, the episode seems to focus a bit too much on Ciri, as this is the first episode we see Geralt and Ciri being a pair. But it can feel a little disrespectful to the source material to force this story to be the backdrop of Geralt and Ciri's relationship bonding experience. But let's give the Witcher writers some leeway. They kind of wrote themselves into a corner since they rushed the main plot of The Witcher to get Ciri and Geralt together. In the book, Ciri and Geralt have actually met once before, but before Geralt even knew who Ciri was. And this is not even mentioning that they had to splice in bits about Yennefer and the fallout of that big battle at the end of Season 1. This even further cut down the runtime of Nivellen, who's supposed to be the title character of this episode. A lot of Nivellen's original dialogue was shortened and explained away in one or two throwaway lines, which is incredibly disappointing. They kind of just gave us the Cliff Notes version of this story. I might ruffle some feathers by saying this, but I think it needs saying. The main plot of The Witcher was never really its strongest aspect. Arguably, the heart and soul of The Witcher is its characters and its world, but the series has never had the strongest of villains, or main plot really. Pretty much all the way into The Witcher 3. It's competent, but it's not extraordinary, and later Witcher books really suffer due to this. The Witcher is at its best when it's exploring a character, an ambiguous situation, or politics, in a short story disconnected from the main plot of The Witcher. The only connection that it has to that bigger plot being Geralt himself and maybe a couple of his friends. And this short story, A Grain of Truth, is the perfect story to display that. It is very much disconnected from anything related to the wider world of The Witcher, and it's an exploration of selfishness and love. A Grain of Truth should have been the focus of this episode. At least it would have made for a more focused story. And as I mentioned before, the main plot of The Witcher is nothing special. I don't know if Netflix mandated that these episodes be an hour long each, and that's why there's so much fluff in this episode. But seeing how HBO's The Last of Us doesn't care about episode lengths being consistent, it hurts a bit to see this adaptation. Well, actually, most adaptations hurt in comparison to The Last of Us. I'll recap the story for those who haven't heard it yet, and try my best to recapture the essence of this short, while adding some commentary here and there. Geralt stumbles upon a gruesome scene. First he sees the vultures, and when he's closer he sees the scavengers. A couple of wolves feasting on two dead bodies in the snow. It seems they may have been dead for a couple days. One was a girl and one was an older male, possibly a blacksmith. The girl was young, likely the smith's daughter, and the blacksmith was clearly a man of some renown. Behind all the bites and cuts, the killing blow was a clear bite to the neck. The odd part of this being that the pair were a far ways away from any path or town. Where could they have been going, traveling this far into the forest? They must have known that the woods are dangerous. Geralt gets a sense that there's more to this than meets the eye. He deduces the direction the two were coming from, and heads the same way. Soon he finds himself upon a solitary mansion, large and yet very much alone. As he nears the entrance, Geralt's horse Roach begins to panic. Geralt senses he's being watched. He turns around to see a girl in a white dress on a hill far away, watching him. Geralt calls out to her, but she turns around and disappears behind the hill. Geralt decides to let the girl go and investigate the mansion instead. But suddenly, the whole mansion seems to come alive. Doors and windows slam and crash as the mansion shakes. A large monster jumps out at Geralt. It was humanoid, wearing a velvety suit, yet his head was that of a bear. Two large tusks protruded from the creature's lips, and his hands were two large furry paws. This odd creature came out yelling and hollering at Geralt in an effort to scare him, but Geralt did not seem that surprised. He quickly and easily drew his sword and pointed it at the monster's face. Seeing this, the bear man faltered, and after a pause, spoke in a plain but high-class voice. "Flee, mortal man, till I devour you. Tear you to pieces," he threatened. But despite his threats, the Witcher did not budge. He remained calm with his blade pointing straight at the bear man's neck. The creature marvels at Geralt's bravery and asks Geralt what he's doing at the creature's manor. Despite the tension, Geralt makes the assertion that the bear man was no real threat. His scare was more for show than a genuine attempt at his life. Curious, Geralt says that he lost the road and asks the beast if he may come in, making the excuse that he wanted some water for his travels. After some convincing, the bear man gives in and invites Geralt as a guest to his mansion. What I love about this section is that it adds to the mystery part of the story. Geralt is a complete newcomer to this situation, and he's learning as much as we are. Figuring out if the bear man was the murderer or not, trying to figure out what the bear man even is. And it turns out that he has magical powers too. The beast reveals that he has magical powers over all things in the mansion. He conjures up a full-course meal as a way to surprise Geralt, but Geralt seems rather unimpressed. As they enjoy their meal, they get to talking. The beast tells Geralt that his name is Nivellen, the son of the noble who owned this manor. He was human once. Geralt in turn reveals himself as a witcher, a killer of monsters. Geralt assures the beast that he was not sent here to kill him, but since the witcher was here, he could help break Nivellen's curse. But oddly enough, Nivellen seemed uninterested in breaking the curse. He rather enjoyed his life as a beast man, and that was what finally surprised the witcher. Nivellen offered to share his story with Geralt, if the Witcher was willing to listen. Nivellen was born to a rather unlikable house. His father built their mansion far, far away from any civilization, as to avoid people. But if they ever caught anyone trespassing on their grounds, suffice to say they were not going home. Nivellen himself was a pudgy kid, got himself tangled up in a group of bandits stealing from whoever they could find on the roads. One day the bandits raided a temple, and they captured a priestess who was working there. The bandits told Nivellen it was time that he became a man. The priestess cursed Nivellen to his current form, uttering something about love and blood, and then she ended her life. It's later revealed that this priestess was a part of the cult of the lion-headed spider, one of the more evil cults in The Witcher. But as with everything in The Witcher, people are not evil, just different shades of grey. In the Netflix adaptation, the fact that Nivellen was cursed because of what he did to the priestess was a final twist. And as a final revelation, it works. It works very well. Like I said, I like this ending. It has a very Sapkowski feel to it, and it gives the moment the gravitas it should have. But in the short, this is a low-tier revelation, implying that rape is a casual thing that happens in the world of The Witcher, as casual as death. Despite this, Geralt still wants to help Nivellen break his curse if he can, whether it's through some sense that Nivellen had lived his penance, or that Geralt thinks Nivellen is less dangerous in his human form. I'll let you decide. The priestess is not necessarily innocent in this either. She's no damsel in distress. She's a priestess of the cult of the lion-headed spider, a cult who frequently kills to commit blood sacrifices to their spider god. Practice of this religion is banned across most of the world and is considered taboo, but at the same time the followers of this religion are usually those who lost people close to them when they were young. I'll let you decide if this changes your mind about Geralt, Nivellen, or even Sapkowski himself. No one is all good or pure evil in The Witcher, and that is part of what keeps The Witcher interesting and fresh. When Nivellen woke the next morning, he had changed. In his confusion and rage, he killed many of his servants, and when he finally had time to regret his actions, it was too late. He was all alone in this tower of a house. He remained like that for a long time. A couple times, a visitor would come by the house, and Nivellen would scare them away with his powers over the mansion. One day, a trespasser tried to steal a rose from the manor's garden. Nivellen chased the thief and scared him half to death. The man confessed that he only wanted the rose for his daughter, and Nivellen was about to kick him out when an idea crossed his mind. Back in his younger days, he'd heard stories of pretty girls turning frogs into princes. Maybe there was a small grain of truth in those fairy stories told to kids before bed. Nivellen threatened the man, "Your daughter, or your life." The thief cried a little, and said that his daughter was only 8. Geralt, of course, chuckled at this, causing Nivellen to be offended. Nivellen, feeling pity for himself and for the man, invited him in, fed him, and gave him a share of his family fortune. He let the man go and resolved himself to the life of a beast. 2 weeks later, another man showed up, and with him he brought his daughter and a big bag. Nivellen and this new man came to an agreement. Nivellen would give away some of his family fortune, and the man would leave his daughter with the beast for a year. At first the girl was scared half to death at the sight of him, but over time she grew accustomed to Nivellen's beastly appearance, and they got to talking. Shyly at first, but they grew more familiar as time went on. When she left, Nivellen felt a different kind of pain. He was alone for a long time. More fathers and daughters appeared at his doorstep, but he never went out to greet them. Sometimes he waited for them to leave, and sometimes he scared them off. After some time, Nivellen felt lonely again. It was nice having someone to talk to after all. He had a similar arrangement with many different fathers. Their daughters lived with him for a year, and their fathers left with a big bag of gold. After the initial fear had died down, the girls got to know him and get closer. Close enough that Nivellen thought that maybe his curse would be cured, but he was disappointed every time. Over time, Nivellen grew more confident in himself and accepted his new identity. In fact, he quite liked his new look. At least the girls seemed to. He showered them with gifts and humored them with his magic and tricks. For a year, the girls got to live the life of a princess, and for a year, Nivellen got to have some company in his lonely mansion. Nivellen found that he really liked his new life. Health was never an issue. He spent his time with beautiful women, and he was safe, as nothing could harm him. Nivellen's tales are probably the most interesting part of the story. It's a shame that they were cut. There's a sense of innocence to him, and it's really interesting to see how he grew and changed over time. And not to mention the fact that the girls actually liked his beastly appearance. It really adds to that sense that this is a twisted version of Beauty and the Beast, and it's the heart of the story, as well as really good setup for the next section of the story. Currently, Nivellen shared his home with someone else, but he would not go into detail on who she was. She was very special to him, and they had been living together for many years. Geralt surmised that she was the girl he had seen earlier on the hill, and that she must be a monster, but not a dangerous one. Geralt offered to help Nivellen once more, but the Beastman denied him, and told him to hurry on his way. Both the manor and the woods were dangerous places of late. Before the Witcher leaves, Nivellen asks him about his dreams. Nivellen's dreams have been dark lately. Could this mean that his life was nearing its end? Geralt confirms the man's worst fears, and asks for a final time if Nivellen needs any help. But Nivellen pushes the Witcher away again. Geralt leaves the manor, satisfied that Nivellen shouldn't be a threat to anyone. It's implied that some time passes, but Geralt has a realization. Geralt's horse, Roach, panicked when they first arrived at the mansion, but she had been calm ever since. Nivellen had even pet the mare, and she was just fine with it. Nivellen was definitely keeping secrets from Geralt, especially about the girl, but Geralt respected his privacy. But if whatever creature the beast lived with was enough to scare the mare, then there was more to this than meets the eye. Geralt turned around and headed back to the mansion. When he returned, there was a faint singing throughout the mansion grounds. It was in an ancient language that he did not know. In the middle of the courtyard sat the girl, her hair and eyes black as night, her skin pale as the moon. He drew his sword and pointed it at the girl. Geralt knew she was a vampire, but not what kind. Geralt taunted the vampire, laying out his plans in front of her, looking for some kind of reaction from the creature. The vampire, named Vereena, was attracted to Nivellen due to his healthy body and immortality. She had an infinite source of blood, but maybe he could be something more. Vereena was planning to turn the beast into her own personal slave. She gave Nivellen dark dreams to slowly turn his mind to mush, so that he would be suggestible and controllable. She was turning him into a true monster, not only a man in a monster skin. As Geralt laid the vampire's plan out to her, she made no sudden moves, no acknowledgements. Must be some form of higher vampire, thought Geralt. Intelligent and cunning. Mula, or maybe an Alpor. No, she was a Bruxa. The Bruxa attacked with a scream. Geralt fought back, but not easily. Bruxa screams are deadly and come out fast. Avoiding them was difficult, even for Geralt. Eventually Nivellen joins the fight, hoping to stop the two from fighting and get everyone to calm down, but he only made the fight even worse. Geralt had fought till he was near death, Vereena towering over him, ready to deliver the killing blow. But then Nivellen suddenly pierced a long pole into the vampire's chest. Vereena, after a moment of shock, grabbed the pole with both hands and pulled herself along it, closer to Nivellen. In the air, faint echoes rang out. Mine, or nobody's. I love you. Love you. She held Nivellen with both arms and moved her face to his neck, but the Witcher was quicker. He cut her head off before she could pierce Nivellen's flesh. After some disorientation and crying, Nivellen wakes to find that he no longer looked like a bear. His face and body had returned to that of a normal man. He marvels at his new complexion and grieves for the dead woman lying on the ground. In both grief and shock, Nivellen asks Geralt how is it possible that his curse had been lifted? And I love Geralt's reply to this, which is also the final line in the story. There's a grain of truth in every fairy tale, said the Witcher quietly. Love and blood, they both possess a mighty power. Wizards and learned men have been racking their brains over this for years, but they haven't arrived at anything except that. That what, Geralt? It has to be true love. Man, talk about a gut punch. That is the tragedy of a grain of truth. This was my favorite story because it's the most surprising story in The Witcher. Unique, but in a good way. The play on the tale of Beauty and the Beast is done really well. It makes you think of that story in a totally new way. It's definitely a more mature version of that story, and the tragedy adds a whole new element to it that totally works. It's a shame that none of this was really explored in the Netflix adaptation. Something I love about Sapkowski's writing is that he leaves a lot unsaid, a technique he uses to great effect in this short. Sometimes it can be very annoying, that you're completely confused as to what's happening, but you can figure out most of the time, if you think about it. The technique works really well in this short, because half the story is just a conversation between Nivellen and Geralt. It's mostly setup. Exposition told well and kept engaging through mystery and what's left unsaid. I can only share what I got from the story. You might pick up on something I completely missed, especially with that ending. What I find really interesting about this story is how up in the air it is as to what Vereena's true intentions were. Geralt at first assumes that she planned to use Nivellen to protect her, as she kills and feeds on anyone who happened to pass by. To do this, she needed control of him, so she gave him dark dreams to change him and control his mind. And maybe this was her intention, but again, it's not clear. It could be that she was being merely possessive of Nivellen. As her final line implies, maybe Vereena was just trying to control Nivellen, keep him for herself. Maybe she was a very jealous vampire and killed any potential suitors who came to the mansion. The girl and the smith who died at the beginning of the story were revealed to have taken a rose from the manor's garden, a rose which Nivellen held very dearly, as it is a remembrance of his late auntie. Vereena may have wanted to punish those trespassers for taking that rose from him, as an act of love for Nivellen, though who really knows? It could go either way. Witcher tales are known for their ambiguity, and that's what I love about them. The show's Vereena is not as ambiguous. She's very much just a monster, being greedy and feeding on innocent bystanders. Even though she had an infinite supply of blood through Nivellen, Nivellen himself seems more evil than in the short. He willingly turns a blind eye to Vereena's activities. At least in the short story, it's a little unclear whether or not he knows that Vereena is killing people. The story's ambiguity has been simplified and removed for the show. The show, for its part, does not really explore what Nivellen was even doing in the manor for those 12 years, why the smith and his daughter came to the mansion at all, and Nivellen's familiarity with Geralt kind of ruins the mystery aspect of this story. Most of the content of the story is summarized in 1 or 2 lines Nivellen says to Ciri. I do like the banter between this trio though, Nivellen, Geralt, and Ciri, but the short's banter was even funnier. And as I said before, the reveal at the end of the story that Nivellen was not really as innocent as he seems is very much a Sapkowski ending. In the show, Nivellen asks Geralt to kill him now that he's lost the love of his life, which mirrors an ending to another short story that I think was cut from the Netflix adaptation. So it's nice seeing that theme get some love. But at the same time, famous last words, the ending has the consequence of making Ciri look dumb. She is willing and ready to forgive Nivellen for killing his servants after transforming, but not for raping the priestess. Both should be considered as at least close to equally bad, and yet the rape is the final straw for Ciri. She gives up on Nivellen, even though it happened 12 years ago. Maybe she justifies forgiving Nivellen for the murder by saying that Nivellen has served his penance over these years. By that logic, Nivellen should have served his penance for the rape as well. Somehow the rape is enough to make Ciri give up on him, but the murder spree is not. Do you see what I mean? This is messy in a bad way. Even the best thing about this episode has its problematic elements. But if I were to defend the show, I I would say that the rape was intentional harm, and the murders were unintentional. I would also say that the rape was revealed in tandem with the fact that Nivellen knew about Vereena's killings, but he was being willingly naive about them, because he loved her. But again, the show poisoned in such a way that the rape is what made Ciri turn away. I say this a lot, but this could have been a good fantasy show. Maybe not the next Game of Thrones, but something close. The source material is that good. Good enough for many seasons of TV, but it seems we get stuck with a lot of fluff and messy adaptations. We could have had tales of love and magic, contrasted and combined with blood and politics. It's a damn shame. With Cavill leaving the show and Blood Origin being as bad as it is, it seems the Witcher IP has taken a serious blow. Hopefully one day this series finally gets the adaptation it deserves, but it seems Netflix for one couldn't do it. And I didn't even have to mention how bad the rest of season 2 was.